You close your eyes at 11 p.m. You expect to be unconscious until the alarm goes off. If you wake up at 2 a.m., you assume something is wrong with you. For most of human history, that assumption would have been backwards. There was no single block of sleep. There was no 8-hour expectation. There was something stranger, older, and far more flexible than anything your phone's sleep tracker has prepared you for. Tonight, almost 2 billion people will fight their own bodies to fall asleep on command. Insomnia is now one of the most widespread health complaints on the planet. So how did your ancestors, with no mattress, no blackout curtains, and no melatonin gummies, manage to rest at all? The answer starts with a historian named Roger Ekirch. In the 1990s, Ekirch combed through thousands of diaries, court records, and medical texts from pre-industrial Europe. He kept finding the same odd phrase over and over. People wrote about their first sleep and their second sleep, not one night of rest. 2. The pattern looked like this. You went to bed shortly after dusk because there was nothing else to do in the dark and candles were expensive. You slept for 3 or 4 hours. Then you woke up, not in a panic, not checking a clock, because clocks barely existed for most people. You simply woke. This middle-of-the-night waking period had a name. People called it the watch. During the watch, you might pray. You might have quiet conversation with whoever shared your bed. Some accounts describe couples using this time for intimacy. Some describe it as a window for reflection, almost meditative. Then, after an hour or two awake in the dark, you drifted into your second sleep and woke again around dawn. 2 sleeps. 1 waking period stitched in the middle. For centuries, this wasn't a disorder. It was just Tuesday. So what changed? Artificial light changed it. As gas lamps, and later electric light, pushed bedtimes later and later, the 2 sleeps compressed into one. By the 20th century, segmented sleep had nearly vanished from Western life, replaced by the consolidated 8-hour block we now treat as biological law. Ekirch's research suggests that law is barely 200 years old. But here's where the story gets more complicated and more interesting. In 2015, a neuroscientist named Jerome Siegel decided to test whether segmented sleep was actually the ancient, universal human pattern or just a quirk of pre-industrial Europe. He and his team strapped sleep-tracking devices onto people from 3 traditional societies with no electric light at all: the Hadza of Tanzania, the San of Namibia, and the Tsimane of Bolivia. These were communities living closer to how humans lived for the vast majority of our existence. No streetlights, no screens, no artificial schedule keeping anyone up past sunset. What Siegel found surprised almost everyone, including some of his own collaborators. These groups did not sleep in 2 segments. They slept in one consolidated block, fairly similar in structure to a modern sleep cycle, just shifted later relative to sunset than people often assume. They typically didn't go to bed at dusk. They stayed active for hours after dark around the fire, talking, telling stories, tending to the group, and went to sleep roughly 3 to 4 hours after sunset. Then they slept through, in a single stretch, until just before sunrise. So which is it? Was ancient sleep 1 block, or 2? The honest answer is both, depending on which ancient you mean. Ekirch's segmented sleep describes pre-industrial Europeans living with seasonal darkness, long winter nights, and candlelight. Siegel's hunter-gatherer groups, closer to the deep evolutionary baseline of our species, slept in a single window, but a window with no fixed clock time start and no anxiety attached to it. What both groups shared was something modern sleepers have almost completely lost: an absence of pressure. Nobody in either community was lying awake, panicking about not being asleep yet. There was no glowing clock radio insisting they were failing at rest. Let's reconstruct a single night for a Hadza forager, the way Siegel's research and decades of anthropological fieldwork describe it. The sun goes down around 6. The temperature starts dropping almost immediately because there's no insulation holding daytime heat in. People gather near the fire. Conversation continues for hours, often about something other than the day's hunt or gather, more like gossip, jokes, and stories passed down. Nobody is staring at a screen calculating how many hours of sleep they'll get if they don't fall asleep in the next 10 minutes. There is no next 10 minutes. There is only the fire, dimming, and bodies growing heavier. Sleep arrives when the body is ready, not when a schedule demands it. The Hadza, San, and Tsimane and Siegel's study averaged just under 6.5 hours of sleep a night, less than the 8 hours often cited as a universal human requirement. And yet, rates of self-reported insomnia in these groups were close to zero. Why would people sleeping less, on the ground, with no mattress, report almost none of the sleep complaints that plague modern life? Anthropologist Carol Worthman, who has spent decades studying sleep across traditional societies, points to a key piece of the puzzle: temperature. In nearly every pre-industrial setting Worthman studied, sleep onset tracked closely with the natural drop in nighttime body temperature, a drop that artificial heating and air conditioning have scrambled almost beyond recognition in modern homes. Here's the counterintuitive twist. We tend to assume that more sleep and more comfort should produce better rest. Mattresses got softer. Bedrooms got warmer. Light got brighter later into the night. And somehow, across that entire arc of improvement, sleep quality didn't rise. It collapsed. The very tools built to make rest easier may have disconnected sleep from the two things your ancestors' bodies relied on automatically: darkness and a falling temperature. Modern sleep researchers, including those building on Siegel's and Worthman's work, now point to artificial light exposure in the hours before bed as one of the single biggest disruptors of natural sleep timing. Screens don't just keep you entertained past your body's intended bedtime. They suppress melatonin, the hormone that signals to your brain that darkness has arrived and rest should follow. Your ancestors never needed willpower to fall asleep. Their environment did the work for them. The fire died down. The temperature dropped. The dark deepened. Their biology simply responded. You, on the other hand, are asking your brain to power down in a room lit by a screen brighter than a midday sky, at a temperature your body has never been allowed to naturally cool from, on a schedule dictated by an alarm clock instead of a sunrise. So tonight, when you climb into bed, here's something worth considering. If you wake up at 2 a.m., you are not broken. You may simply be doing something your body has done for most of its evolutionary history, something that only stopped being normal a couple of centuries ago. The watch wasn't a glitch. It was a feature. You close your eyes tonight expecting one uninterrupted block of unconsciousness. Your ancestors expected nothing of the kind, and somehow, they rested easier than you do.